Well, welcome to session 6 here, Benefit Cost Analysis Basics. Now I'm moving on from the original discussion or definition of what constituted costs and what constituted benefits. And we're going to start thinking about and working our way through determining calculations of benefits and costs. And I'm going to start out pretty basically and in a way that I think will convey this, that at least help you think about it. I've described what a benefit is and I've described what a cost is, but we have to insert something else, and it's time. And time is something we have to think about in our process of valuing things. I did this for you early in the class when I said what I made in 1983 when I first went to work as a researcher at the University of Iowa, and I said what would that income have to be in today's dollars for me to have the same purchasing power as I had back then. And so we had to adjust that information for inflation, and right then and there tells you that money means something different over time. In the 1980s, there was a period of very, very high inflation, and money and the value of money had a different meaning than it did now, and our relationship to consumption and decision making during the 1980s was different than it is now, even though we're right now in a recession. In the 1980s, I bought my first house on a contract at a 12% interest rate, and I refinanced gladly at a 10% interest rate. Now, if people right now were trying to imagine that, they'd say, well, that sounds insane. Well, given the value of money and the rate of changes that were going on at the time, a 10% interest rate for my house was a good deal. 2 years later, when I was able to finance it 8%, I thought that was a fantastic deal. It all depends. The house I live in now has a 4.5% mortgage, a very low mortgage. Completely different time, completely different relationship. The effects of inflation have changed, and as a consequence, the value of money has changed, and what I can anticipate buying with my money today versus tomorrow has changed. And so the thinking in terms of the time value of money is very important when we do this. I have up here the sort of, I got to start all over here. I have up here the basic definition of what constitutes a benefit and a cost calculation. The first thing to know, it's benefits first, costs second. I keep saying benefits cost because it's benefits divided by costs. And so what I've got up here is the basics for what we're going to be doing and what we're going to be learning here in a little bit. And I hope I give you some good enough examples that give you a sense of this. But over the life of the project that we're considering, what we want to know is, are the benefits, and that's the sum of all the benefits over the string of time from time zero when we started the project, when we thought about building the bridge or whatever we were going to do, to some time out in the future, time in, does that string of benefits exceed the string of costs, the sum of all of those costs over that very same time period? If benefits divided by costs are greater than 1, the ratio is greater than 1, then it's producing net benefits to society, and the program should be funded. We would say this is a good deal for society. By definition, the program is producing net benefits, and therefore society is better off by funding the program. Now, I'm going to back us up just to the last lecture. We know that we could calculate a benefit-cost ratio relative to tobacco consumption in the United States that is way greater than 1. We know that. So just because you have a benefit-cost ratio greater than 1 doesn't mean that something is politically beneficial, in the sense that politicians will embrace it and fund it. Even though society obviously will be on net significantly better off as a consequence of it, we have institutional and political and cultural impediments to doing something like that. Okay, move on. If the sum of all the benefits divided by the sum of all the costs are less than 1, which means the costs are greater than the benefits, is all it means, then the program is producing net costs to society, and the program should not be funded unless there is an overarching non-economic reason for the program. And this would fit into the category, in general, you would reject a proposal because it had a bad benefit-cost ratio, or you would reject it because you couldn't explain that less than desirable benefit-cost ratio with a set of intangible benefits that society generally agrees and readily accepts as worth the cost. And there may be many examples like that, especially in the environmental areas where it's very, very hard to document. You might be able to identify programs that come very, very close to satisfying the benefit-cost principle, but they're loaded up with lots of intangible, clean air, water quality, things like that that are not as easy to measure. And so then again, it has to be, is there a general social consensus that indeed this is a good program? And is there the political willpower or the political capacity to push this in light of all of the other projects that might be out there that have better benefit-cost ratios? Remember, you're dealing with public money. And public money is very special money because there's not that much of it. The dollar that you spend doing something is a dollar you can't spend doing something else. And it's not just a value judgment. It is truly the case that very important things may be left to starve or to struggle as society moves from one emphasis to another emphasis, and there could be very, very strong consequences as a result of that. So we're very, very careful. Remember, those costs are public costs, they're public money, and they're very special dollars. So in a benefit cost analysis, this is how we talk about this. The discounted present value sum of all of the benefits over some period of time, and I'll explain discounted present value sum, is compared with all of the public costs in the project over the same time period. If the benefits exceed the cost, the project is to be funded. If 2 or more projects are evaluated, governments will look at both the benefit-cost ratio and the total of benefits to be achieved after the costs have been accounted. We call those the net benefits. In most instances, the choices that yield the most net benefits, the numerical net benefits, are most desirable, not necessarily the choices that have the highest ratio. The choices that produce the most net benefits for society, and that's where getting back to that Kaldor-Hicks principle too as well. But if you have 2 competing programs and both look desirable, then the rule is the program that's producing the most net benefits. Net benefits are what's left over after all of the costs have been accounted. The one that's producing the most net benefits is most desirable to society. So that's, and that we also have to take into account the time frame so that we're dealing with. Now let's consider this following very, very simple table. And I have several things here that I'm going to want to identify here. I'm going to change my thing so I can mark this up and just have a mess like I always do. Let's have a felt tip. Let's have a highlighter today. No, let's have a felt tip pen. Okay, now I never can. Here we go. I've got 5 programs. Well, actually, I've got 3 categories, but 5 different programs. I have a transit program, and we're going to talk about this in a second. But I have a transit program, and let's say that I've identified that I have a population of people in my society that don't have access to transportation. They cannot drive, they don't afford cars, they're not capable of driving for one reason or another, but that I understand that there is a transportation need in my community that's not currently being met. And in this case, there's a real impediment to a certain group of people being able to access and get the transportation services that they need. Usually with transportation services, it's because of a combination of low income and no car, or low income and no relationships that allow you to be transported. So I might have two choices. I might have a system of vouchers where we subsidize, let's say, a bus ticket for people, or I have a system of minibuses where for a certain subpopulation that we think is very needy, we have regular routes of little minibuses that go around and collect them. It could be in the case of a disability population. It could be in the case of a rural population. We have that out here in the Midwest, rural transportation systems that primarily serve the needs of the elderly. So that would be an example. Now, let's say I have a job training system, and right now in the United States, job training is a big deal for a variety of reasons, going back to the Clinton administration when they eliminated the traditional welfare programs and replaced it with something called TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. It limited the amount of time that a mother, for example, could collect welfare for her lifetime. And so that mother, regardless of how her circumstances might change in the future, is limited into how many years she can be receiving assistance for that family. So the alternative to that is that this person needs job training. So job training is very important. We're in a period of recession and recovery right now with a lot of restructuring in the United States, and again, job training is very important. So maybe we have two types of job training programs. We have a daytime training program, and let's just hypothesize this works really well for welfare mothers whose children might be in school between 9 and 3 and gives them an opportunity to gain valuable skills while their children are in school. And we also might have a job training program, and it's a nighttime program to satisfy or to provide services or assistance to people who have regular jobs during the daytime but are trying to upgrade their skills or to get out of a rut of a low-paying, no future job. And so we have flexibility. We have two different. And then we have something here, a dam. We always got to throw a dam in for recreational uses because when in doubt, somebody thinks, let's just build a dam and the economy will be better. So those are my. So we're going to start thinking about benefits and costs. Okay. Now, I'm going to go over to the costs right away as soon as I find my mouse. Here it is. Right here are the costs. These are the costs to the taxpayers. Those are the public's costs. And so when we're doing any kind of benefit cost calculation, this is the denominator, the cost to the taxpayers. Okay? Now, in this very simplified example, I've got my benefits, and let me find this. These both are my benefits. These are my gains, and these are the offsets or the losses to suppliers. So I have gains that are accumulating to society, but I also recognize that in producing those gains, there are going to be some losers in this system. When I built the bridge across the river, the ferry boat operator went broke. Okay, so when I did that, I made it so that something was economically infeasible. Now, okay, so you see what happens. There's always going to be an offset. There's never going to be a clear set of winners in any kind of choice without some set of losers. No matter what, there's always going to be an identified losing group. Okay, so the gains to consumers minus the loss to suppliers equals the benefits, the gross benefits to be expected. Benefits are gross benefits. Okay? So all of that information in the first two columns is information I might be using to calculate what the benefits are. Those gross benefits minus the costs equals my net benefits. Okay, so let's just look at this first one really quick. $200 million worth of gains minus $50 million worth of losses to consumer or to some supplier means that I have total benefits of $150 million minus the costs of $100 million leaves me net benefits of $50 million. It's a plus. And so if it's plus, my benefit cost ratio is going to be greater than 1. It's going to be my $150 million worth of calculated benefits divided by my costs, 100 million, gave me a benefit to cost ratio of 1.5. So all of you understand what I just did. This is no big deal. Okay, so let's talk about this, and let's have a hypothesis about some of these. I don't know if it's a hypothesis or we're going to test some alternative scenarios. So imagine I have a transit system, and so we've estimated that I've got a needy population that if they had access to transportation services, it would lower their cost of getting work, achieving health care, of obtaining all of the goods and services that they need, or allow them access to things that they currently don't have access to, but we think they ought to have access to. Well, some of these people over the years and over the days or whatever, we've calculated those gains at 200 million. But you know, they did get from here to there, and they may have used taxi services, or they may have paid somebody, like a neighbor, to take them someplace. Well, if you think about that as a transaction in society, by providing this service, that transaction goes away, and if that transaction goes away, then the recipients of that money, whether it's the taxi driver or the neighbor who takes you to places, loses. And so there's a loss to suppliers. There's a loss to suppliers who are supplying some alternative to this good. So then the 200 million minus the 50 million gives me my benefits in this case of 150 million. The cost to the taxpayers of a voucher program are relatively low because what you're doing is you're just basically printing up let's say it's a voucher or a bus ticket, and you're distributing it to people, but you're also paying for that service. Well, what do we know? We know that public transportation per mile traveled is cheaper than private transportation, and so as a consequence, the public's cost for providing that services versus an individual trying to buy that with, okay, what we're doing is we're creating or we're paying for a much more efficient transportation system this way. Okay, we're paying for an efficient transportation system by subsidizing and creating the opportunity for folks to have transportation services. So that's option one, and it's good. It has a benefit cost ratio greater than 1. But let's say that our population is not always well served by the existing system, and what we have to do is actually go out and get them on some kind of regular daily or weekly route, and we have to use as minibuses or some sort of specially configured vehicle. Then I have a system, it's the very same thing. I'm still providing the same kind of timely transportation for this population, and the losses to suppliers are still in the same territory. They're losing their opportunity to sell services to a portion of these people, because at some point they would have always had to buy transportation services no matter what, but they can't get enough transportation services. But in this case, the cost to the taxpayer is much higher, because now what we've got is a system of of actual direct service delivery where we've invested in not an existing transportation infrastructure, but a specialized piece of transportation delivery, which is the minibuses, and it's got to be maintained, and you've got to have drivers, and you've got to have planners, and you've got to have schedulers, and you have to have all kinds of things, and it's a much more costly type of system. And you may do it in partnership with an existing transit authority, but you still require specialized equipment. Well, in this case, it costs twice as much to the public. And so it costs $200 million, and so the net benefits are negative. The benefit cost ratio is 0.75. So by those two criteria, you'd say, well, I wouldn't fund that program. Now, I'm going to get into this in a little bit, but what if you summed them both? What if half of your population needed A and the other half of your population needed B? And if you summed them both, you would end up with a situation where the benefits equaled the cost, and you would have a benefit cost ratio of 1. And remember that previous slide, if it was greater than or equal to 1, then it says society is not worse off by providing this service. And you could look at this and say, well, we've provided something good here without harming society. This should stay. It's a 1. It should stay. The costs are completely compensated by the benefits, and we can look out there and see that people are being benefited by this, and it's a good thing. Well, we'll hold that off in a second here, but the normal rule would be B would not be funded. Okay, now let's do the next thing. Job training, daytime. Same thing. It's a very expensive, it comes up with a great amount of gain, and we're saying the daytime, and the reason it's much higher, $450 million, is because the daytime population is much greater. The opportunity to come in the daytime for the group that's being served, let's say in this case, is much greater. And again, I have some losses to some suppliers because there might be some private schools or other kinds of technical or job assistance private sector activities that these folks would have used were there not a public program. And now that there is a public program, they have no reason to use these private sector resources, and so they lose money. They lose sales. So in this case, we have $450 million worth of job training, daytime job training gains, minus $50 million of losses, gives me $400 million worth of anticipated benefits, a large benefit amount. But it's also an expensive program, $300 million. Job training requires people with salaries, lots of people doing the job training. And there's all manner of skills that may have to be developed within a population, actual technical skills or language skills or life management skills or any number of things that are part and parcel of putting together an employable and trained person over a period of time. Still, at $300 million, it produces a substantial amount of net benefits, $100 million. The $100 million in the benefits means what I'm getting are at some level, I'm getting productive people into the workforce. I'm getting productivity or potential productivity. And by training these people, I'm making them more valuable to the economy because the economy wants more valuable people. So I'm going to get net benefits of $100 million. I get a pretty good benefit cost ratio of 1.33. But I have a lot of net benefits to society. Now my nighttime program, it doesn't produce as many gains. It's, the attendance is much lower. Who wants to go to school at night? $100 million. The losses to suppliers are lower because they mostly work during the daytime, and the demand is less among this population. So it's just $10 million. So the net gains are 90. Not the net benefits. The gross benefits or the total benefits are 90 million. So they're substantial. They're there. There's something that we can see. But the cost to the taxpayers are 100 million. You still got to have a building. You still got to have personnel. You still got a lot of fixed costs that you're trying to cover, but you've got a much smaller service population, and it very well may be determined that this thing is. So it's producing net negative benefits and a benefit cost ratio that's less than 1. And again, we'd look at that and we'd say, okay, if I were to choose only between C and D, C would be chosen. But in choosing between C and D, the D people don't get assistance. And then we have to deal with that equity issue. I have something available for one group, but I have another needy group, maybe just as needy, but I can't provide those services. The first group is a bunch of welfare people. Maybe the second group is a bunch of people that are working hard, but they need to get farther in life because they're stuck. Which group deserves help the most? Well, you might be very compassionate and say, oh, we need to do whatever we can for that first group. Or you might say, boy, I admire that second group trying to pull themselves up through their bootstraps and move on in society. Boy, if I were to weight this, I would weight their gains much more heavily. Well, we don't get to weight their gains on a mathematical sense more heavily. We can only do it on a subjective sense. Okay, and then last I have my dam. I'm going to build a great big dam, 650, and I'm going to say I'm putting this dam in an area where it had nearly minimal impact on land use. Let's say I'm putting the dam within the confines of what's already public space, government land, that had not been used for any other market activity. There was no ranching, there was no farming, there was no meaningful recreational activities or hunting or anything else that mattered, or the fact that we put this dam in and the water took up all that land didn't materially alter those kinds of opportunities in that region at all. So there's no losses to suppliers, in the sense here. There was no competing use that was meaningful out in that space. But it's expensive. Dams aren't cheap. So this cost $500 million to put this dam up. But it has lots of benefits. And what are going to be the benefits? Well, flood control are going to be the direct benefits from this. And this dam is a nice high-head dam, so it's got a hydroelectric capacity. So it's also generating a very valuable commodity that is in need in my region, and so it's generating electricity. So I'm getting flood control and needed electricity at a price that could not be delivered to this region at a much lower price that we're able to deliver to this region. So we're accumulating some benefits that are very noticeable. And over the life of the dam, now the dams have a long life, and this may be calculated over a very long period of time, but we'll learn about this. All of these benefits are the discounted present value, and so we take all of those future values and bring them back to the present, and we calculate what they're worth. And we say the present value of those benefits are $150 million. And it has a pretty good benefit cost ratio of 1.3. Now this demonstrates to us right off the bat that the benefit cost ratio that was the highest, imagine this is all part of a budget package. The benefit cost ratio that's the highest had the least net benefits. The net benefit calculation that was the highest, $150 million, among the viable projects had the lower benefit cost ratio. All other things being equal, if this were to be made as a decision that were neutral, we would fund the dam, and we wouldn't fund, if all we could do is fund one, we would just fund the dam. Well, politically that's not acceptable. We wouldn't do that. And so we could work our way through this, and we could sort out some decision-making criteria. Okay, so assuming complete information and no otherwise identified constraints, which are the viable projects? Well, viable has to satisfy our benefit cost principles, producing net benefits. Those are A, C, and E. Those are our viable projects. What would be the total budget recommendation? Well, the budget recommendation is going to be the cost to the taxpayers. It's the $100 million for A, $300 million for C, 500 million for E, for the dam, and that's the total budget recommendation of 900 billion. What would be the total benefits? Now, these are total benefits, not net benefits. Well, the total benefits are going to be the 150 million of total benefits in A, 200 million minus 50, the 400 million benefits in C, and the 650 million dollars worth of benefits in E. And so that's a lot. Is it 1,200? 12. What do I have written here? 400 plus 400, 2, 150, 400, 600 plus 650, 1,250. Okay. Now, what would be the net benefits? Well, the net benefits are going to be everything that's going to be in this column, and if I can get my mouse up, there it is. The net benefits are everything that are in this column. They're going to be 50 million plus 100 million plus 150 million. It's 300 million in net benefits. So we can compare right off the bat the total benefits of 12,000 compared to the total cost of 900. I keep saying 12,000. I mean to say 1,200, 1,200 million or 1.2 billion compared to 900 million in costs. These darn commas, they get me every time. Let's just fix this right now. Okay. Anyway, just disregard this. Anyway, so we can calculate this thing. It's producing net benefits to society. If we were unable, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. If we were unable to identify the gains to consumers in A and B, if we're unable to identify the gains to consumers in A and B, this is an interesting one. In A and B, which program would likely be funded? Meaning we don't really have it. We know that transit services are good, and we know that we can calculate some of the gains to consumers, but we have some uncertainty about how much we can calculate in this category. Then the question is, but we know we need a transit program. Then the question is, which program do you fund? Well, now we're talking about an effectiveness measure, not a benefit cost measure. An effectiveness measure would be which program serves the most people at the least cost. And at first blush, we would assume, if we're assuming the number of people served in A and B is anticipated to be the same, then on a cost effectiveness basis, option A is best because it costs least. And we would choose that one. Not knowing anything else, we would just simply choose that one. But using that same criterion, we would have to think about this for a second. Because let's imagine the job in C and D. Which one would you fund? Well, you wouldn't fund the cheapest one, D, the job training program, if it was clear that many, many more people were being funded per dollar spent in the daytime program. So here's the case where what you have to do is you have to use a cost effectiveness measure, not a benefit cost measure. If you didn't know what the benefits, if you were uncertain about the gains to consumers, what you would do instead in government decision making would just simply say, what's the average, which choice has the lowest average cost per student or person served? And that would be the one that would be chosen. So it wouldn't necessarily be job training D, because it's probably going to be higher cost per person served. It would be C again. So these are the kinds of things that we're having to deal with. And let's say that we have budget constraints and we can only spend $400 million. We don't have $900 million to spend. We can only spend $400 million. Well, which projects are we going to spend? A and C. We can't, E is too expensive. So if I have budget constraints, even though E produces net benefits, we don't have enough money for it. And if we don't have enough money for it, we can't fund it in the current budget cycle. So we have to think about this. Or maybe we can spend $800 million. what could we fund? Well, at 800 million, well, we can't fund A. We could fund E and A, or we could fund, and with some money left over, or E and C. Well, we're going to spend all our money. We're going to fund E and C. But we can't have some combination of these where we make it work. And so we're going to have a problem funding that. So C and E would probably be what would be funded. Oh well. So anyway, there's lots of things that there are constraints to our choices, and it's something I want to talk about. I'll get to it in the next slide. But there are constraints to our choices, and I started out with this is, can we think in terms of an average benefit? An average benefit. And I'm not going to do the A and B one anymore. I'm going to do the C and D one. And where's my mouse? There it is over there. So we're doing C and D. And what we're saying then, is it okay let's let the very strong gains in C subsidize D? Subsidize D. Could we do that? Should we do that? Because even if you added them both together, you'd have 550 in gains to consumers minus 60, $490 million in gains to consumers compared to $400 million in cost, 300 plus 100. You would have net gains, net benefits to society of 90 million. 90 million. And so if I had not specified these separately, but combined them as just a job training program, I could have hid that inefficiency. I could have hid that inefficiency. That the gains, that I'm using the gains in one system to subsidize the losses in another system. Is that okay? Well, there are purists out there that would say, no, that's not okay. That's not okay. That's violating the spirit of good benefit cost analysis and truly picking the best programs. But we've made the case that these evening people are special people and they need assistance, even if they're a little bit more costly, even if they're somewhat of a drag on the economy. Is it okay to borrow a little of the benefits from the daytime success to offset the losses in the nighttime success? Again, some people would say no. And I'm going to say, you bet. It's okay to do it. And here's why it's okay to do it. We're already doing it in benefit cost. We're already doing it by making a determination that these categories of things are important things, and we're more than willing to sacrifice losses to the supplying groups. That's that Kaldor-Hicks thing, and we're not compensating them. We're not compensating them for their losses. We're just accounting for their losses and saying, that's just tough. Too bad. Go find another job. Okay. So we're already doing that. So in this case, what we're doing is we're failing to pay society quite as fully as we had promised, but in so doing, are we achieving some very important social goals, which are human capital development, job training development, and is that okay? So there's two dimensions to this. Now, that also puts us in a situation, though, how noble I am to think about this in terms of the job training program by putting them together and I'm taking care of these people. But what if what you have is a set of projects and one of them's really just a stinker? It's a dumb, stupid project. It's got a bad benefit cost ratio. It has a strong amount of net losses, net costs to society, but it's popular and your senator loves it, and you shove that thing up into a bigger project where all of its bad characteristics get lost. Well, of course people do that. They do it all the time. And is that okay? And I'm going to argue, no, that's not okay. No, that's not okay, because you're not declaring some sort of greater good to society as a consequence of what you're doing here, making the same argument that you would be for the job training program with this icky little project. Let's just say it's a bridge to nowhere. Oh, I shouldn't pick on that one, but golly, it's so easy. But let's just say it is, and it's hidden way up inside of a bill and of other things that are viable. important and viable, roadway improvements and transportation enhancements and smart transportation monitoring systems and all of this kinds of stuff that's designed to lower traffic safety, traffic deaths and improve traffic safety and improve our overall well-being. And you got this really bad stinker stuck up in that project, hidden away, where all of its negative attributes are hidden. I'm going to say ethically that's incorrect and that's immoral. And I'm going to say ethically what I'm proposing with regards to the job thing has the potential to be correct and to promote equitable distribution of resources. So it's not cut and dry, but I wanted to get it across. So we have constraints to our choices. Do we think in terms of average benefits, which is what I just talked about with the job thing, versus the marginal benefits? The marginal benefits, the itemized benefits for each type, a daytime program and a nighttime program, which one do we do? Choices cannot be made independent of other decisions. These were choices that you would think in terms of an entire budgetary package. And in the current state fiscal climate, you could have an incredible array of merit-worthy programs that over a long period of time may produce good, solid, defensible benefits to society, but we're broke right now. And who the heck are you to come in and try and tell us we'll be better off if we fund your project when we're trying to fund current accounts right now? And so you can't make these choices independent of other decisions. Politically, we have to pay attention. What does it take to get a bill through? And rarely is the best package funded. Best as in the technically, economically most efficient package. And then we have practical analytical limits. There are always underlying uncertainty that we are in fact accurately estimating benefits and costs properly. Time compounds that uncertainty. Remember my example. The experiences I had in the 80s with regard to how the economy was behaving are completely different than our average experiences here in the 2000s as to how the economy is behaving. Well, we were in a recession then and we're in a recession now, but trust me, they were different time periods, and it affects how consumers respond and what our outlook is on the future. Now, the next lecture I'm going to delve into, let's try to get a handle on this compounding uncertainty and how do we deal with the future and how do we translate the future into the present. So I'm going to work my way through trying to get a handle on what's the present value of all of this stuff and how do we do that. And it's really going to take me 2 lectures. I'll get this one done. I'll get it set up in this next lecture, and then we'll do some examples, I'll think, in the one following that. The next lecture is going to be on the time value of money, and we'll come to that in the next session. See you then.